Matthew Turner is a British author who wrote his latest book, Beyond the Pale, on the back of interviewing hundreds of successful entrepreneurs, authors, investors, and thought leaders. As well as writing his own books, Matthew ghostwrites both articles and books for other successful entrepreneurs and thought leaders in between spending time with his two children. I am delighted to have him on the show today to talk about his book and the hustle. So let's not wait, let's jump straight in. Welcome back to the Wedding Procast UK, everybody. My name is Donna. I am your host, and today I have a fantastic guest with me. I have Matthew Turner in the house. He is an author. You will have heard all about him in the intro. So we're just going to jump straight in. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's always lovely to speak to someone from my neck of the woods as well. I love speaking to the American audience, and just about all my clients are there. But yeah, it's rare that I get to jump on one of these calls and hear a familiar accent. So yeah, it's very
Well, I
exciting.
love your accent. Yorkshire is one of my favourite places. I could listen to you talk all day long. So we are going to hear a little bit more about you. I would love it if you would introduce yourself and let the listeners know who you are and what it is that you do.
Sure. Well, my name is Matthew Turner, and as you say, I'm a writer. I mean, that's kind of what I do. I write for both myself. So I published my fifth book last summer. It's here, Beyond the Pale. I think we're going to be touching upon that shortly soon. But as well as writing my own books, I also ghostwrite for clients, and that can take the form of books also. But it can be, guides and various other content. It takes on various forms these days. There are a great deal of experience writing in my own head, but also jumping into other people's. And my every day is just centered around the written world, and it's wonderful. And I've been doing it for quite some time now. So yeah, as you mentioned, I'm up here in Yorkshire. I have two kids. They keep me busy, especially during the summer months, as we've just had. So I'm glad that they are back in school. It makes my life a little easier. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here.
Fantastic. And I think that it's really interesting. And listeners may be thinking, a writer? Donna, why have you got a writer on the show? What's that got to do with weddings? Well, all will become clear, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to touch on the book first, because I think that I was quite surprised by the fact that this book is based on a lot of research that you did with people. We are going to be talking about hustle culture today, and Beyond the Pale kind of goes into that, sort of confronting somebody with their life and how they are living it, and whether that is truly what they want to do. And I find it fascinating because most people who want to help entrepreneurs, who want to help business owners, they tend to go down the route of writing the self-help, self-development type books. So you've got people like Mel Robbins and Tony Robbins and I've forgotten her name. Girl, wash your face. Can't remember her name. All of those kind of people, Marie Forleo, all of these people that want to help entrepreneurs, and they write these books that are pretty sort of factual. If this, then do this. And
Sure.
you have written a fictional book. So I wanted you to kind of touch on the book, what it's about, and why fiction over that kind of self-help instructional type book.
Sure. I mean, it's a great question. So Beyond the Pale, here it is again. It is a fable. So it's a bit of a blend of fiction and non-fiction. It's the one I always liken it to is like The Alchemist, where it's very much a fictional novel. It's a work of fiction, but it has certain real-world applications where there's a genuine message and a clear message around it as well, in the sense of it's not just there purely to help you escape or entertain, but educate in some form or another. But it's a very subtle form of education. But here's the thing, it isn't new. If you think about how we have evolved as a human species, how we have particularly evolved civilizations and societies, we've done it through storytelling. Just look at any kind of religion. They've passed down their teachings not through self-help guides, do this, do this, do this. I mean, there's parts of it I know, but a lot of the times it's done through parables, it's done through fables, it's done through examples, because people have an affiliation towards storytelling. We remember them. If someone tells you a compelling story, you're more likely to remember that versus someone who gives you a fact or a figure. And it's how we pass on information for the vast majority of the human existence on this planet. It's only recently that we've started to have things like books, and it's been a click of a finger since we've had things like the internet and videos and all the like. So it's kind of practically built into our DNA to have a kind of connection and a trust with stories. And as you say, books galore these days. Like, you can't go 2 minutes before you find a writer who's developed some kind of nonfiction how-to book, some kind of self-development. Do this and you will get this. And they are helpful to an extent, and they have a place, especially if you want to know something specific.
Yeah.
So if you know what you're looking for and you're just needing a bit of a blueprint on how to do it, then those books can be really helpful. They're also really helpful at giving you a very genuine sort of general overview of a topic. But that isn't the case for a lot of us. A lot of us have this feeling, a little inner voice, that little anxiety that something's not quite right, and we're not sure what that is. We can't possibly get the answers until we start asking the right questions. And oftentimes we will be more inspired and more empowered and more, I suppose, drawn toward a story. And I think that's why a lot of religions over the millennia have used stories to form connections with people. It's why we have such a strong affiliation towards things like movies and TV shows, because it's the power of storytelling. And some of the best books I've written, and some of the things that have inspired me in the most profound ways, have been works of fiction rather than works of fact or education. When I read a book where it's designed to educate me, I learn a little, but maybe not a lot. When I read just a great book that's designed to inspire and empower me and help me step back and escape the everyday a little bit, that's often when my brain like allows itself to take it all in and to form the dots that I need to form. So that's what Beyond the Pale is. It's a novel, but it's just a novel with a little bit more intention, in the way of any other fable or parable is. It's fiction with a purpose. It's not just designed literally to help you escape or to entertain you. It will hopefully do that. But there's a very specific message behind it to try and get you to tap into those correct questions.
Fabulous. Okay, so we'll come back to the book and some of the questions that you were mentioning a little bit later. But first, I wanted to discuss this word, hustle. And you know, a lot of people have used it over a lot of years, and I think people are trying to move away from it now because it kind of has these negative connotations. But to you, what is hustle, and why is it something that we need to try and avoid?
Yeah, it can be really toxic. And I think whenever someone hears the word hustle, and I try to make this differentiation, when you hear hustle, you think about the people who are glorifying burning the midnight oil, the person who's got a side hustle on top of a side hustle. And sure, that can be a toxic form of the hustle. That's like the poster child of hustle, but it goes much deeper. As with most things in life, there's what we see on the surface, but then there's the, it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's an entire berg below the surface that we can't see. And that's where I try to place the attention when it comes to the hustle. And a lot of it comes to the fact that we are just ever connected. Like right now, we're able to do something amazing. We're, 100 plus miles away, yet we're speaking as if we're in the same room. There's people listening and watching this, possibly in other continents, but we're connected. Right now, I can pick up my phone. It's here, like everyone's phone. If you're listening and watching this, chances are your phone's within arm's reach, right? Because that's life.
Possibly listening to it on their phone, yeah.
Possibly listening to it on their phone while they're doing something else, driving, running. I mean, that is the world in today's society.
Yeah.
So we can, within seconds, just access information. We can be off work, but just check email. or Slack or Telegram or WhatsApp or Facebook or whatever else, to escape and to just kind of have a bit of a brain and let our brains unwind a little bit from the work, from those tasks in front of us. We turn to Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, and we find, before we know it, maybe mindlessly scrolling for 10, 15, 20 minutes, 2 hours. Again, I think we've all been in those little time suck warp holes from time to time where it just captures you. And in and of itself, nothing is wrong with any of that. It can be fine. But what it does is it gets you comparing yourself to someone else. You're constantly getting an edited peek into another person's life.
Mm.
We've had that for a long time. My parents' generation, their generation, but they usually only saw, the sort of perfect person on TV or in the magazines. Okay. Today, it's all around us. It's not just celebrities. It's those people you follow on Instagram who, we don't know what's going on in their life, right? We don't know whether they're touching up their pictures on Facebook, whether it's you comparing your body to theirs, or they seem to be happier, more successful, richer, wealthier, just living a more fun life. You only see what they show you. And it's not just the celebrities, it's not just the leaders of the world, it's everyone. You see like 12, 13-year-olds creating a following because they're able to just connect their edited life to the ether that is the internet. Our parents' generation, their parents' generation also got it when they went into the office. The whole saying of keeping up with the Joneses, right? You saw your neighbor get something, so you'd want to get that. The people who drive certain cars at work, you're trying to replicate that. But again, you only saw the neighbors, your colleagues in the office. You could go years and only literally see those kind of people, like what we see in a day, because of the internet. We can scroll through Facebook for 30 seconds and get an edited peek into 10, 15, 20 people's lives.
Yeah.
And that is overwhelming. We're not designed for that. We're like this fragile little human body that has taken millennia to slowly evolve our hardware, our bodies. And with it, our mind has been slowly evolving with it. But society, especially in the last 20, 30 years, is just whoosh, like a tidal wave. And it's overwhelming. We can't handle it.
Yeah.
So what happens when we can't handle it? Our defenses come up. We procrastinate. We feel insecure. We self-doubt. We turn toward quick fixes, be it drinks or drugs or whatever else that you might be addicted to. There's a load of things these days, isn't there?
Yeah.
Social media, the phone is a version of addiction. It's just an escape. It's just a way for us to not feel that doubt, that anxiety, that whatever it may be. So that is the hustle. This idea of working 12, 13, 15 hours a day, that's a toxic part of it. This idea of burning the midnight oil, that's a toxic part of it. But it goes much deeper. It's just this thing that we're all part of. We can't escape it unless you literally get rid of the phone, go off the grid, move to the country where you're 10 minutes away from the nearest thing. But even then, you can only do it for so long. Even then, you can only do it for so far. So that's the hustle, this consuming, overwhelming world that we live in. It's great because it breaks down the barriers, and we can have things like podcasts and YouTube channels empower us to create and share. I wouldn't be able to do what I do today 15, 20 years ago. Certainly not 30, 40 years ago when my dad was getting into the working world. So it's amazing. It's empowering. It's inspiring. But there's a shadow side to it. There's a dark side to it.
Yeah.
And that is the hustle. So it's not just this idea of, oh, do you work 10 hours or 12 hours or 13 hours? Oh, you're into a hustle. Now, to an extent, we're all in the hustle. To an extent, you will never, ever escape the hustle. But you can be more conscious of it.
Yeah.
You can be more conscious of your particular relationship with it. Take back control that you can. Let go of the rest.
I think that is so incredibly insightful, because I'm there with everybody else thinking, oh yeah, the hustle is just how much you're working and stuff, but it's the influence of everything around you that kind of puts that pressure on you, that makes you want to feel, or makes you feel like you need to work those hours. And you're right. And I've said before, I wish sometimes that we could just switch the internet off and start again, because there is absolutely so much rubbish on the internet. Yet everybody who is in business is told again and again and again, you need to put out valuable content. You need to put out valuable content. And everybody's putting out all of this content all the time, churning, which is part of this hustle. And everybody's out there going, I'm so overwhelmed, I can't even look at it, and then we do the mindless scrolling on social because that's a way to switch your brain off. But that's subliminally telling you, oh, look at what they've got that you haven't got. Look at what and that's even an unconscious part of it there, that you're not even the, just random scrolling, or you get sucked in for 15 minutes. You're taking in these ideas and these perceptions of people without you even really focusing on it.
Yeah, and it perpetuates everything bad. Like I say, there's so much great of it, but it perpetuates everything bad. If you think, for instance, like getting bullied, I used to get bullied at school sometimes, but it was at school. I was able to leave it at school.
Yeah.
These days, kids are getting it at home because of the ever connection with the world. You can get bullied from people you don't even know. My son is, like most kids his age, he's almost 10, wants to be a YouTuber when he's older. And one of the things which I have to get very clear with him is, you've got to understand that there are, those people out there who just want to be mean or be trolls, and that comes with the territory. So all these things which always existed, they just exist on a completely new plane and level now. It's just intense. It's just immense. And we're all aware of it. We're aware that we're in the middle of like a pandemic of mental health. We're more aware of it now, but there's more people struggling with depression probably than any point in history because of this overwhelm.
Yeah.
And we have no idea what we're doing. And honestly, it is huge. It affects everyone to some extent. It doesn't prejudice. Doesn't matter how successful you are, how much money you have, whether you're this, that, or the other. We're all pretty much in its grips. It ain't going anywhere. Not until someone does come along and switch off the internet. No, I mean, we may end up in a dystopian world eventually, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. So it's not a case of escaping the hustles per se. It's about learning to live with it.
Hey guys, I just wanted to interrupt the interview for just one moment, because at the end of the show, after we switched off, Matthew offered me a copy of his book to give away to one of you guys. So I would love to do that. And to do that, all you need to do is screenshot the show right now as you're listening, share it on your Instagram, tag me at Donna SPWV, and tag Matthew. He is turndog, TURNDOG.co on Instagram. So tag us both, share this episode, share your biggest takeaway, and I will pick one of you guys to win a copy of his book. Now let's get back to the interview. When we start in business, we often fall into the trap of hustling, working every single hour that God sends and justifying it that we're at the beginning of our journey. It'll get better. I've got to do all of this because I need to make a name for myself quickly so that I can start earning. And, I will find a balance later on. And I believe that most of us don't find that balance. We just keep going. And I wanted to talk about it because you talk about Ferdinand finding the right questions before he can get the right answers. And this is the main character in the book, guys. Just to mention that, yeah. So yeah, the main character.
Who's Ferdinand?
Yes, exactly. And I think often, my podcast guests come on with answers to the questions that I'm giving them, and then my listeners are taking that away and they can implement it. And a little bit like the self-development books that we were talking about, it's quite instructional. Here's a question, here's your answer, you can go and action that now. But here I think it's important that listeners know the questions they need to ask themselves so they can find the answers of where they're stuck in the hustle. And, I thought that because you've written this lovely book, and you've gone through it with this main character, perhaps you could talk to us a little bit about questions we might want to ask ourselves, so that we can start thinking about where we are in our lives, what this hustle looks like to us, and how we might move past it.
Of course. Well, first of all, um, I would like to say I'm very proud of the fact that I've written a book that doesn't really give you any answers. What it hopefully does is inspire you to start asking the right questions, which I'll touch upon in a second. But first, you mentioned a really good point. When you're starting out, and it's an excuse I hear, and it's not an excuse, that's unfair, it's not an excuse, it's a reality. You've got to hustle. You've got to work maybe longer and harder than you would like to. Maybe you do need a side hustle before you're able to, for it to become the thing. Right now, I'm kind of I'm very busy with work. I've got new projects happening, and it's just a bit overwhelming, a bit crazy. And that's just part of it, especially whether you're working for someone else, whether you are the boss, whether your business is small and started, whether it's established. There's waves, there's chapters. Sometimes you can take a step back and have a bit more time for yourself and your family. And other times you're like, no, I'm going to have to really commit for the next couple of months because I've got this thing happening and all eyes on it. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I'm not on here saying hustling's terrible. I'm not saying just because you sometimes have to work 10, 12 hours, you're destined for a life of misery. You're destined to put yourself into a hospital. Okay. Sometimes we have to hustle and it's fine. It's fine. Yeah. Okay. So just take a breath. It's fine. We're okay. The important thing is to be conscious of it and be like, yeah, I am working harder than I should be right now. One, have a reason for it. Understand why. Are you doing it just because you're scared of otherwise, having given yourself a break? And we'll come on to the questions in a second. But yeah, is there a reason behind this hustling? Okay. Is there a purpose? Has it got reason or rhyme or not? And second, is the end in sight? Don't just have an open-ended thing where, yeah, this is just going to become a new thing. Because as you say, we adapt as people. So we become comfortable with it. Yeah. So if you get used to working 10, 12, 13 hours a day, there'll come a point when you're just used to working 10, 12 hours a day.
And then you feel guilty if you do stop. You're like, oh no, but I've got stuff to do.
Exactly. You get so used to working those hours. You get so used to, quote unquote, the hustle that one, you burn yourself out. But two, when you go through a quieter period, you freak out. You feel guilty. You're like, oh my God, I've got time on my hands like that. I don't know what to do with it. So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Yeah.
So it's about not allowing it just to become your everyday, because that's when it gets really dangerous. So have a reason for the hustle and put a time to it. I have to do this right now because X. And once I reach X, I'm going to give myself some time. So maybe you reward yourself with a trip away. Maybe I don't know, whatever it may be. So that's the first thing. Regarding those questions, yeah, Beyond the Pale doesn't really give you any answers, but it does hopefully inspire you to start asking the right questions. And Ferdinand is the perfect example of it because he is a very successful person. He's a fictional person, but when you're reading Beyond the Pale and you get to know Ferdinand, you will probably picture a type of entrepreneur, type of business leader, someone who you follow online and go, oh yeah, it's him. Or yeah, it's her. And on the outside, so successful. Has it all figured out, the fame, the good looks, he's young, he's healthy, he's got the money, everything's looking great. But as we learned pretty early on in the book, on the inside, he doesn't feel that. On the inside, he's got so caught up in the following of the Joneses, going down the path of, well, that's what I must want because everyone tells me that's what I must want. But he's actually lost sight of the vision, the entire thing that was the reason for him to start the business in the first place. And once he realizes that, he just feels utterly lost. Now, he's lucky because he's got the fame and the money to be able to kind of go around the world and meet amazing people and start, piecing together the puzzle. Not all of us will have that ability. But to an extent,
have the book.
But we do have the book, yeah? So you can live that wonderful life through
vicariously through him.
Exactly. But what we all have the ability to do is, as we're reading all those things and go, oh yeah, what are my thoughts on that? What's my relationship to that? When I started out on this journey, or when I was 17 or 18, one of the people who appears in the book, AJ Leon, he talks about it when I interviewed him a few years ago now. And he said, often people get so caught up in there trying to like find themselves. They're assuming that they're trying to find this new person.
Mm. And
what he talks about is he wasn't finding a new person. He was rediscovering who he once was. He was reconnecting with that 16-year-old dreamer who was ready to like burn the world down and, start again. And once he reconnected with that person's dreams, that person's vision, that person's motivation and desire, that's when it clicked into place for him.
Yeah.
And we all have the ability to that. We don't need to travel the world to do that. We just need to give ourselves the permission to ask those questions. We just need the permission to delve within and go, all right, how am I feeling? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling? And often it's not about trying to find who you are, someone new. It's about rediscovering who you were at the start of that business, when you had that massive vision. When you're a teenager and you didn't want that job and that particular career path because of reasons. Rediscovering who you were, rediscovering who you are, and getting back on the right path. What those questions are, I mean, I can't give them to you. I can give you a few guidelines. One of the big ones that I've learned over the years is most of us have a very wishy-washy definition of success. I mean, just think about it right now. Like, pause this podcast or whatever, and I'm asking you the question, what does success mean to you? Chances are, if you spend 30 seconds thinking about this, you come up with nothing. We use this word success, and maybe you don't use success. Maybe you use meaning, purpose, fulfillment. We use these words as if they mean something, but they only mean something if you make them mean something. Otherwise, they're just words. So what does success mean to you? What does wealth mean to you? What does happiness mean to you? Most people, myself included, don't usually have a particularly clear answer to that. And maybe you did have an answer to it, but you've got pulled off track because of everything that we talked about so far in this communication, the hustle, constant bombardment of overwhelm. Most of the time, we subscribe to a version of success that was passed to us from parents, friends, the people we follow online, just society as a whole. We're led to believe that if you have certain things, you do certain things, you act in a certain way, that makes you, quote unquote, successful. But does it? Maybe it does. Maybe success to you is having millions of dollars or pounds. Maybe success to you is having the ability to travel the world in 5-star luxury hotels. But maybe success for you is a bit more wholesome and humble than that. Maybe it's just having more time with your family. Maybe it's being able to provide for your family with only having to work 4 or 5 hours a day so you can take the kids to school and pick them up again and not feeling a complete and utter rush. Maybe success is something completely different. Nobody can tell you what success is to you, even though everyone out there is seemingly trying to tell you what success means to you. The only thing that matters is what success means to, underline, capital letters, exclamation points, infinity, you.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of asking the right questions. So often we are desperate for answers. Another person who appears in the book, Cal Ravikant, great guy, very inspiring individual. And he called me out on it when I was doing my interview with him because I was asking broad questions. And he was like going, too broad, you need to be more specific. That's a problem that I see in people. They ask broad questions and expect to get a specific answer. But you cannot get a specific answer until you ask a specific question.
Yeah.
And we're all guilty of that. I was guilty of that on the interview, but I stepped away and the real takeaway I took from that was that that's what I do in everything. That's what most of us do in everyday life. We're just throwing broad questions out into the world in the hope a specific answer will find us. In the hope that if you just throw a bunch of stuff out in the world, you will magically figure out what is wrong with you, what that inner voice is trying to say. And maybe you'll be lucky, but you likely won't.
Yeah.
Whereas once you start asking the specific question, once you start throwing the right question out there, then chances are you will uncover the correct answer.
Yeah.
And it's a tricky one, but yeah, for one of those kind of keystone, like root questions, but I always encourage people to ask at the very least, because it's usually like a bit of an onion. It helps you peel it away. It sends you down a bit of a rabbit hole. Is this idea of what does success mean to me? If you can start asking that question and just follow those breadcrumbs and peel that onion and use whatever other kind of metaphor you want to use for this, then you will go down a path. And in time, you will probably have a clearer view of what success means to you. And it won't be set in stone because life changes. We go through chapters. Success today may look different tomorrow, but the point is you're starting to ask the right questions. And if you continue to ask the right questions, you will continue to find the right answers.
I love that. I love that. And this just reminded me of two things that I have done in recent times that I think might be helpful to you guys. And that is literally this Tuesday, I met with my accountability buddy, Claire, and you all know I've spoken about her before. And she said that she had heard something about somebody wanting them to write down 300 things that they want. 300 things, a list of 300. And I was like, I don't want 300 things. Like, all I want is X, Y, Z. And then we tried it. We sat there for 10 minutes of our meeting and we wrote as many as we could. And I think I got to about 45. She got to 40. And I was like, I'm not sure I could get to 300. And I think if you try and do that, what I found is it is a bit of a self-discovery, because you start looking at things and I started thinking, God, that's really materialistic. Why
Yeah.
why
do
do
I
I
want
want all
that?
that? And that was just with 50. If you try and get to 300, it's amazing. And I think probably, and I started to see it towards the end of the list that I was creating, other things came out that were more what I wanted for my life and purpose rather than things so much. Little ones started to come out. And I think if you work through it, by the time you get to 300, probably the last 50 are the truth of the matter of what you really actually want. And you'll probably find it's not that materialistic stuff. Maybe it is for you and that's all fine. But that would be a really good little challenge to set yourself. 300 things that I want, and write it down. And then the other is something that Amy McLaren, who I had on the podcast last year when she was promoting her book, Passion to Purpose, she took us through something that she got from somebody else. And I cannot remember the original author of the idea, so apologies for that. But it's that step questions of starting with this question: what does success mean to me? Writing the answer and then writing, but why?
Yeah.
And doing that 7 times to get down to the crux of why that is successful. Because you might get down to sort of step 3 or 4 there on the whys and go, actually, that doesn't actually work, does it? That's not really what I want. So I think it's really important that you don't just answer a question and go, well, there's the answer, so that was easy. You've got to do exactly what you were saying, Matthew, and peel that onion and go down those layers.
It's so true. Great exercises, love them both. And yeah, it's important to do stuff like that, because you have to remember, as a human being, you are a story making and pattern forming machine. If you look at babies, you'll see how inquisitive they are. They're literally trying to piece the world together, and they're forming meaning out of nothing. A lot of the meanings and the beliefs we have, they only make sense because we make them make sense. We build a narrative based on what we see and experience. So you get to a certain age and you've just lived a long life of just forming various perceptions and stereotypes and assumptions to try and just make better sense of the world. And it's becoming more and more important to do that, because of everything we discussed earlier, the fact that there's so much now. We're in such an overwhelming world. Our pattern forming stories storytelling side of our minds are just on like overdrive all the time.
Mm.
And things like success and meaning and the so-called vision that you have is a byproduct of those things. So you may think it is X and you may think you have good reason for that. But when you start asking, but why, but why, but why, you may realize that it was a form of defense, or it's built on something that is no longer true to you. So, yeah. And it's not necessarily about trying to get to an answer. Sometimes it's like philosophy, isn't it? If you think about philosophy as an actual act, it's not about ever discovering an answer. It's not science. There's not like a fact at the end of the rainbow. There's not a data. There's not something objective. It's the journey that matters. It's the fact that you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, going beyond the pale. It's the fact that you are stretching what you know in the exploration of trying to discover something new.
Yeah.
And there may not be an answer per se, but by questioning what you thought was the answer, that may give you everything you need.
Indeed. Indeed. Oh, thank you so much, Matthew. This has been a really good conversation. I absolutely love it when I get people to come on and have a discussion with me. I think it's so much more fun than just speaking to myself.
Yeah, yes.
Oh dear. So where can people get your book, Matthew?
Of course. Well, here it is again. If you ever kind of see it in the
One last
bookshops or
time.
on Amazon, one last chance, Beyond the Pale. And you can find out more about it at beyondbook.co. So that's beyondbook.co. On there's links to where you can get it online. There's also a link so you can read the first few chapters to kind of get a feel for Ferdinand and his little journey. And if it's one you'd like to embark on, then yeah, you can delve ever deeper. There's also links to my Facebook and Instagram. So if you've got any questions, if it's sparked any kind of question or anything in you, then feel free to reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook, and it'd be great to have a chat. So yeah, beyondbook.co, that'll give you everything you need.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I will put that in the show notes, guys, so you can head over to my website and find that. I'm sure you know where that is by now. So thank you very much again, Matthew, for coming on the show. Thanks, guys, for listening. As always, please do share this episode with somebody in the industry that you think might benefit from it. And I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.